This is a demonstration on how to knit with yarn in your non-dominant hand, which for me is my left hand. And this style is called picking rather than throwing with yarn your dominant hand where you let go. I have another video for that. When you're picking, you need to hold the yarn in your non-dominant hand. And a common way of doing it is take your pinky and come behind the yarn and wrap it around. So you have a full revolution around your pinky. And then dip your index finger underneath. Notice this is a very short distance. If you're trying to knit with it far away, you're going to have a lot of trouble knitting and even more trouble purling. So when you set it up, be close. You can always slide a little farther away, but it's harder to scooch up closer without another set of hands. So I'm holding the yarn here. It's got a short distance. And notice that the yarn is behind the needle and it's between the first stitch and the end of the needle. That's ideal. Now my dominant hand holding the needle, so it's for me my right, is going to go in. It's going to go around the yarn to grab it. You may want to hold on with your index finger here and pull it through. So I go in, the needle goes behind the yarn to scoop it up, pull it through. In, behind the yarn to scoop it, pull it through. Now the key is that I have this short distance here and I'm holding the yarn behind the needle, but touching the needle and in between the stitch and the needle. So when I go in, the working yarn is right here where I want to grab it. So I'm going to give you kind of a different view here. So it's right where I want it to be. So my yarn is already where my needle's heading. I can just grab it and keep going. So once you're comfortable with this, it gets a lot faster. Couple of tips: check that you keep this distance short and you want the yarn to be coming off right about at this knuckle. If it's too close to the end, it's probably going to fall off your finger, and if it's too far up, you're going to have to reach farther to get it, which will work, but you'll know it's not great because your elbow will pop up, and if you're on an airplane, you'd be smacking into the person next to you. So have the yarn right where you need it, and each time I pull through, the yarn is advancing along my index finger. You can see it moving, and that is a good sign as well. Check that your stitches aren't too tight. They should move pretty easily on your needle here. And I'm going to show you how to purl. And I've taken my left hand out. You might have done that as well, so let's get back in. So the pinky comes from behind the yarn, full wrap, and then drape it over the index finger. Now when you purl, you need the yarn to be in front, and the needle's going to come to the front as well. So I'm going to push my stitches up a bit. The yarn here is still between the stitch and the end of the needle, and it's a pretty short distance. Mine can actually be shorter, so I'm going to tug on the end of the yarn to pull that a little smaller. So now for purling, my needle comes from the back to the front, and notice the yarn is still in front here. I'm going to tilt my needle up, and I've already got about half a wrap around this needle. When you're new, you probably want to drop your finger down to the front, and then you can come out of the stitch and away. I'm going to do a few more like that, then I'll show you how it works when you're a bit more comfy. So yarn's in front of the needle. My right needle comes from back to front. It's already in there, tilted up. I've got about a half a wrap, and my finger comes towards me and drop it to the floor. Exit and come through. Take the old one off. Up, tilt, wrap, exit, take the old one off. Now, when you're new, you do want to really bring this down to make sure that you feel confident that you have the yarn wrapped around the needle. When you've got a little bit more comfort with it, you're going to find that you don't have to wrap this far, just enough to get your yarn through. I'm going to do that again a few times. So up, and my finger comes towards me and down a bit, but just enough to sneak through. I don't need to actually drop it down so low once I am confident that's going to come through. It can be helpful to picture like a little tiny hook at the end of your needle that's just barely catching it. All right. So this hold is really common. Let me show you some other options. Some people do 2 wraps on their index finger, and then they'd be holding their work. And some people will lace the yarn through their fingers. The key is that the yarn always comes over the front of your index finger as it goes towards the work. All right, I hope that was helpful. Happy knitting.